Good afternoon and welcome to today's Dunstan Thomas webinar on the pensions dashboards. I'm Adrian Boulding, Director of Retirement Strategy here at Dunstan Thomas, and it's my pleasure to chair today's event. As always, we're grateful to you all for giving up your lunch hour to be with us, and to respect that, we will finish promptly at 1 o'clock. Today's event on the pension dashboards is hugely timely. Just last night, I attended a speech by the Minister for Pensions and Growth in which he set out the government's vision that everyone should become much more engaged with their pension. They want us all to have a much better understanding of what's saved in our pensions to date and whether that will give us the quality of life in retirement that we want. And if our pensions are undershooting, then government want us to be in a position early enough in our careers that we can make sensible and informed decisions to accelerate our voluntary saving to top up our pensions. In short, you should pay your pension some attention, and that's what the little badge is all about, of course. Now, some years ago, when I was seconded to DWP to help write the Making Automatic Enrolment Work Review, we analysed the labour force and discovered that the average person has 11 jobs in their career, and 1 in 4 people have 16 or more jobs. So we should not be surprised that people have multiple pensions. And as diversity is quite a good investment strategy, some people will actually prefer to retain their multiple pensions rather than move them all into a single consolidator vehicle. The pension dashboards will enable people to easily keep track of multiple pensions and to see what they can expect at retirement. And the dates are rapidly approaching when those of us who hold pensions data will be required to receive and respond to find requests from pension dashboards, hence the timeliness of today's webinar. So if you're running a pension scheme, then you need to work out how you're going to handle what could be quite a tsunami of requests. We have 2 great speakers for you today to help you with these issues. Firstly, we'll hear from Lucy Stone, who is Business Lead for Pension Dashboards at the Pensions Regulator. Lucy Stone leads TPR's team working on pensions dashboards, overseeing its programme of education, communications, as well as the development of its operational processes ahead of going live. Lucy has been involved in pensions dashboards since 2017, working first with Treasury and then DWP on the development of the policy and the legislative framework. In addition to dashboards, she has extensive knowledge of pensions administration policy and experience of project, programme and portfolio management. Lucy joined TPR in 2010 from the civil service. And following on from Lucy, we'll hear from Richard James, who is Programme Manager for Pension Dashboards at the Money and Pension Service. Richard joined MAPS as PDP's Programme Director on 1st of April. He came to the role with over 20 years public sector experience. Previously, he's delivered digital personal tax accounts, including the Check My State Pension Service within HMRC, implemented changes required to support the UK's exit from the European Union, and delivered the Trader Support Service within Northern Ireland. Richard is passionate about using digital technologies to put citizens in control of their own information and is very excited about the opportunity that pension dashboards present to allow consumers to improve their retirement provision. After their introductory remarks, we'll turn to questions from you, the audience. We've received some already, but please do ask some more. And there's a little question button on the right of your screen, so have a press on that. That enables you to ask a question. But click on that button even if you don't want to ask a question, because it will enable you to see the questions submitted by others and to vote for the questions that you'd most like to see our panel of experts answer. And as regular attendees of Dunstan Thomas webinars will know, we try and address the most popular questions. I'll now pass us over to our first speaker this afternoon, Lucy Stone. Lucy, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to speak today about pensions dashboards. I'm going to have a little bit of a trip down memory lane and set the scene about how this came about. Pensions dashboards were first mooted by government in 2016 in the budget. And industry was tasked with developing dashboards, and industry developed a proof of concept to show the technology worked, which was a huge step forward. One of the things that came out of that initial work was that compulsion was needed. In order for dashboards to work, you have to have all the pension schemes on there, and that would only be achieved if legislation was made accordingly. So then government set out legislating for pensions dashboards. Legislating is not a straightforward process, and I have to say I've been involved in this, and the complexity of it has been huge. And legislation was first in the Pension Schemes Act 2021, which set the framework, but actually most of the detail is in regulations, which were consulted on by DWP early in the year, and have just been laid in Parliament, so will be made final soon. I'd say it's a hugely complex area. You'd think it's relatively straightforward as a concept. You know, everyone provides information, you use your phone, you get something. But our regulatory landscape is huge and diverse. Not only do you have personal pension scheme providers who are regulated by the FCA, you have occupational pension schemes that are regulated by TPR. Within that, you have DB schemes, you have DC schemes, with various levels of systems. In our regulatory remit alone, TPR, there are 3,000 schemes who are going to be in scope of dashboards, and they're supported by several hundred administrators and dozens of software providers. So it's not a small task. So I like to think of this as a bit of a relay race. If you think government fired the starting gun in 2016, industry did the next leg of the relay with the prototype, and they went back to government to do the legislative framework. And now it's the final leg of the race, and it's over to industry to get ready. There's a lot to do. Trustees need to get going. I've flipped up one slide for this session, which is the staging timeline. The very first schemes will have deadlines of the 31st of August 2023. That's the largest master trusts of occupational schemes, but it's also personal pension schemes and stakeholder pension scheme providers. Then large schemes, starting with the other master trusts and the DC schemes U4E will stage. Starting slightly later, DB schemes, all other DC schemes, so those not used for automatic enrolment, and hybrid schemes will go. At the end of the large schemes, you have the public service pension schemes. They will have to stage in September 2024. This is in reflection of the huge amount of work they have to do because of the McLeod remedy. And then we move into medium schemes between October 2024 and October 2025. And down the line, potentially small and micro schemes as well, but government would need to legislate for that separately. I'd like to reflect not only on my experience of dashboards, but also TPR's experience of automatic enrolment. The further in we go, the more we uncovered quirks and challenges. I mean, I know more about pensions than I ever thought I could possibly know, because every time you uncover this little bit of complexity, and the legislation is designed to try and preempt some of these challenges and try and get our head around, but we can't possibly know everything that's going to happen. And one thing that worked very successfully in automatic enrolment is it was what the true collaborative working between industry and the regulators as issues arose, lots of communication, lots of joint problem solving. And I think that's really where we need to be here. This is a big initiative. There's a lot to do, and we are all going to learn as we go through it. And it's really important that we talk and communicate openly. So I think we need to approach it with sort of curiosity and enthusiasm. I have great faith in what this industry can do when they put their minds to it. There are huge benefits to savers in terms of improving their decisions, hopefully, reconnecting with small pots, all that money that they owed and they don't know about, which is more important than ever before, supporting access to guidance and advice, but also for schemes that will benefit of having more engaged membership, and improving data and systems, because to be frank, the industry has not necessarily paid data and systems the attention it deserves to date. So this is there's a bit of catching up, but I think there will be benefits potentially for automation and economies. We're hugely supportive of dashboards at the regulator. We have an extensive programme of communications. We've put out guidance, which I would encourage everyone to go and read. We are writing to all schemes at least a year ahead of their at least a year ahead of their deadline, explaining exactly what they have to do. And generally, we feel this is really well aligned with our strategic vision for the future, for savers having high quality services. So that's a little bit of background of where we got to, where we're going. So as I said, a lot of communication, but also in parallel, we're building our compliance and enforcement approach, so we are ready to regulate when the duties fall due. And I guess the rest I'll cover off in questions.
Lucy, thanks for that. I think I very much share your enthusiasm too for this. And I think we'll all rise to the challenge. Once upon a time, I used to work for an insurer that launched a pension plan. They built the bit that took the money in, and they said, "Oh, we'll deal with claims and stuff later, Adrian. We'll just manage manually on that." And maybe back in the 1980s, that was kind of okay. But I think today, you need all that information to hand, because the pension dashboard is going to ask you, have you got this member? How much is in their account? And you've got to reply within strict statutory timescales, which are not going to allow for a sort of manual lookup of stuff. You're going to need a system to do that. So yes, I share your enthusiasm, and I think we'll rise to that challenge as an industry together. Now that moves us on to our second speaker, Richard James from MAP. So Richard, I'm going to pass straight on to you now.
Super, thank you, Adrian and Lucy, and it's a delight to be with you all today to bring you up to speed with where we got to in what is an incredibly exciting initiative. And both Lucy and Adrian there have talked about the level of enthusiasm and passion that sits behind pensions dashboards, and I think that absolutely underpins everything that we are doing in this program. It is an unquestionable good. What we are doing to build dashboards here and place the power in the hands of the citizens, so they can really, for the first time, understand their provision, get to grips with it, and start to make better choices about their retirement provision. So it's a really exciting thing that we are doing, and it's a really exciting point that we have reached in the process of doing it. So if we could go to my other slide, I wanted to give you a bit of a sense of where we're up to and how this all plays out from here. And the biggest message that I would sort of leave you with in my opening statement is that it's all getting very, very real now. Lucy talked a little bit about the number of years that we've been working on this idea for, and it came across to MAPS in sort of 2019 to mobilize a program to deliver this. Having been several years in gestation already, and lots of work done since then to shape the program, to shape the detailed design of what needs to be done to deliver these things. Underpinning all of that big idea we've talked about is a quite complicated technical architecture. Essentially, we've needed to build systems, boxes and wires, to stitch together an entire industry, to bring in information about pension entitlements from thousands upon thousands of schemes, and connect those up with the potential dashboard providers. That has been a really big undertaking. And of course, industry's fed into ideas around how that should be done at various stages over the evolution of all of this. And the point that we have now reached today is the point at which we have done that build. So that architecture is now built and ready. And we have been working over the course of this year on that development, but also with some early volunteers to do some testing around that architecture and make sure that it works. And we're at a point now where we're pretty confident in the thing. It does what we need it to do. And I am expecting to be flicking the switch on making this thing live and turning it on within the coming days. So this is a really, really exciting point in the program's evolution. That is going to mean, therefore, that the technology is there, and we can then at that point start turning our attention to working with the rest of industry to make sure that we are getting ready to start connecting everybody. Now, there's lots and lots of different bits of work been done in parallel to prepare for that. So while we have been building that architecture and the technology that underpins all of this, we've also been doing a lot of work on the standards that sit alongside that technology. And those standards are really, really important. Some are quite dull, I'll be honest. Some of them are very technical standards about how bits of technology need to speak to one another. I don't think any of us is going to to be pulling that out of an evening for a nice comforting read, but it's really important stuff to ensure that everybody in industry knows what you've got to build in order to connect up to this ecosystem. And of course, we've been working really closely with some of those firms, the ISPs, who are likely to provide the interface layer for an awful lot of industry on this, but also with some of those bigger organizations who are likely to build their own solutions around it as well. That technical documentation we have consulted on over the course of the summer and concluded that consultation on the 30th of August, and we will be publishing a response on all of that as we move through November. That's really important because that's the milestone at which we are really clear with you, this is what your build's got to look like. So that's absolutely crucial. We've also been working on the far more interesting parts of standards, the first part of which is about the data that actually flows through all of this. So lots and lots of work, and again, consultation on what is the information that we are asking schemes to provide about those pension entitlements to feed through into dashboards, to ensure that we can populate those dashboards and present that data in a way that makes really good sense to people and allows them to make good decisions rather than adding to their confusion or prompting them to go down paths that we are not comfortable with around inappropriate action to support their retirement provision. Again, we consulted on those data standards over the course of the summer, and we will be publishing an update on those as we move into November as well. And then the final part of work on standards has been about dashboards themselves. So we actively want a very active and lively market in dashboard providers to spring up. We are developing a non-commercial dashboard within government that will be hosted and delivered by the Money and Pensions Service. That's really important because we know for some of our users, knowing that that is a non-commercial dashboard with somebody who doesn't have skin in the game in selling them anything, as it were, is really important to some of our citizens, and that will be delivered. But we also know that in terms of driving engagement, getting dashboards out there where people already are, whether that's in their bank, their employer, their existing pension provider, other financial services companies, we know that people are likely to engage with those far more readily than actually going and hunting out the MAPS dashboard. So we're actively looking to encourage many dashboard providers into the market. Provision of dashboards will be a regulated activity by the FCA. They will shortly be consulting on the regulatory framework around all of that. And in parallel, over the summer, we had a call for input to help frame some of the standards that will set out how that data needs to be presented on dashboards. That has all been informed by some really extensive user research that we've done in the programme to test out what works for people, what lands with them, what aids their understanding and drives the right behaviours. And that has informed the thinking we have done so far. And we're also now in the process of looking at the responses that we got over the course of the summer so that we can then do a further consultation later on in this year that will help to finalise the dashboard design standards that will be really, really important in terms of saying, all dashboards must comply with these things, because that will set out, this is how you need to present that data to be understandable. These are the caveats that you might need to wrap around that. These are the things that you can and can't do around onward journeys from the dashboard, for example. So really, really important stuff to help ensure that those commercial dashboard providers present that information in a way that we know will work for people. So all of that work is coming together. We've got the technology built. We've done a lot of the technical work that helps to set out how people need to connect to that. We've done testing with our early volunteers around those connections and that architecture working. And we're doing the work as well on how all of that plays out within potential dashboard providers and the products that they will ultimately bring to market by way of pensions dashboards. And that means we are now ready to move into these later phases that you can see on the slide in front of me as we start moving into connection of participants. As I say, we're expecting to turn the technology on within the coming days, and we will then be working to do a few things. We will start by connecting the non-commercial participants in the ecosystem to that to make sure it works well. So that is the MAPS dashboard itself, and also the Department for Work and Pensions to get state pension data into there. We're kind of using those as our guinea pigs to make sure that all of our onboarding and connection processes work really well and smoothly before we then open that up more widely to those organizations that have volunteered to work with us in the early stages of this. And then from there on to everybody else as we move through into next year to ensure that everybody can get connected to this thing and start feeding data into it. As we move into next year, we then get into those compulsory connection deadlines, and that's the bit where the rubber really hits the road for the rest of industry. We will have thoroughly tested our connection processes, we'll have thoroughly tested the architecture by then with those early volunteers. We will know that it is working well, so that when we come to those compulsory deadlines for connection, we are able to really well support all of you as you go through those steps to connection. And then at some point in the future, and we're deliberately not deciding when that will be yet, we will move from the test phase, which is what we're in now, of getting industry connected, working with some early citizens to get some insight on how they're finding those dashboards and iterating out those dashboards. At some point in the future, we will move to the dashboards available point, which is the moment at which we will open up dashboards generally and allow everybody to start using those. And you will have seen that in the past week or so, the Department for Work and Pensions has published some thinking on when we will approach the dashboards available point, and we will only do that when certain conditions are satisfied, and that's things like having enough coverage of pensions in there for dashboards to be meaningful for people, having a really good experience for users in those dashboards and being confident that they are driving the right behaviors and not the wrong ones, ensuring that architecture is performing really well, looking at issues like rates of partial matches and ensuring that those are at manageable and sensible levels. All those things we will be taking into account in making that determination of when we should be opening up dashboards to the public at large. So there's a little bit of a sense of where we're up to on all of this. It is a really, really exciting time for us. And as I say, I think the primary message that I'm sharing at the moment is it's real. We've done an awful lot of the legwork in this now. It is time for industry, and I know many of you already are, to be taking those steps to get ready for that connection deadline, to have your data in order, to work out how you're going to connect to the dashboard ecosystem, and taking those preparatory steps to be ready for when your deadline hits. Adrian, back to you.
Richard, thanks very much for that. That was brilliant. It's great to hear your confidence in the technology build so far. It's great to hear that you're taking it gently in terms of working gently towards a good dashboard availability point, rather than sort of having a politician pick a date out of the sky. Because this, as I see it, this is going to be a litmus test for consumers' trust in pensions. When Joe Public can just go onto the pensions dashboard of their choice and key their details in, pass through the security, and have their pensions played back to them. If what they see is what they're expecting, if they can make sense of what they're seeing, then we boost trust in pensions, which is great news, because people will save more if it's a vehicle that they trust. If, on the other hand, it doesn't give them a good experience, then we might actually do the reverse, and we might damage trust in pensions. So, I absolutely and wholeheartedly think you're going about it in the right way. We take it gently, make sure we get a good experience for the people when we launch. So we're going to go into the questions, and we've got a clear leader in terms of the numbers of votes for which one's our most popular question. It's around the issue which we sort of just touched on as we went through the presentations around partial matches, and it's asking us, how will the partial match process work in practice, and how is it going to be tracked and monitored? That sounds a little bit like a regulatory question. So Lucy, can I come to you with that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's worth taking a step back and explaining what a partial match is for the members of the audience who won't know. So the way it will work is, Sabre will log in. They will have to use an ID verification system, which will assert that so you can be confident that the name is right, the date of birth is right, the address is right. You'll be provided other information like national insurance number when they input it. And you use that information to search your records. Now, you may be very confident that, yes, you found someone because lots of these elements match. That's great. And then you can send back all the information. And that's called a match made, which is not particularly wieldy. But effectively, you send back all the information. So they will see value of their parts, what kind of benefit is, the name of the scheme, and your contact details, and lots of other things. Sometimes you may be like, I'm pretty sure I've got this person, but I'm not 100% confident. Because let's say maybe it says Rich James, when you're expecting Richard James. I'm pulling an example out of the air there. And so there's two things we want to avoid, I think, we all want to avoid, is one, that you don't say, yes, I found a pension for you, when you actually do have one. So you fail to match someone, which is obviously a breach. And the other thing you don't want to do is go, yeah, I've got a pension for you, when you're wrong, and you send someone lots of information that isn't theirs. Those are the two extremes. The advantage of partial match is you can do something somewhat in between, and you can go back and go, right, Richard James, sorry, picking on you. Richard James, I think I've got a pension for you, but I'm not 100% sure. Here are our contact details, please call. And that's a partial match. You're not sending any data, personal data back, you're not sending value data back, you're literally sending you information and they can pick up the phone and confirm who you are. So it's a really powerful tool to avoid a data breach. Or if if you're not showing the confidence of your data, to kind of match but not go too far. But obviously, it's not the ideal user experience. You'd like to be confident, and that's why Richard was talking about monitoring the extent to which these are used. So I'll talk a little bit about tracking and monitoring. This is a bit of a technical side, but effectively what you do is you when you register the benefit with the architecture, you will say whether it's a partial match or confirmed match. And we can look at that. The system will be able to look at that. We as a regulator can look at that. And so we will be able to see the extent to people. And what we're interested in the first instance is the extent to which this is used and more the user experience. In these early days of user testing, is it disproportionate? Is everyone getting partial matches all the time, which wouldn't be ideal? But let's be clear, partial matches have huge advantages, especially if there's concerns around you're not 100% sure. And so we do expect them to be used, and in some circumstances they should be used. So we will be keeping an eye on these trends. Richard and his team will be keeping an eye on the user experience, and we will do it from there. So I know there's a follow-up question about...
Yes, the follow-up question is quite interesting. It's about trying to sort of work out how can we manage the volumes, because I know that particularly I think the smaller pension schemes are very worried that their help desks could be overwhelmed. We're going to clearly see large numbers of requests coming into the dashboard. So the follow-up question is really saying, if they're feeling a bit overwhelmed, could they just turn off partial matches altogether and simply just return either a yes or a no? Or could they, in some way dynamically match the fine-tuning of partial matches, so that if they find that they're getting quite a lot and they're getting a bit snowed under with people coming on saying, well, you said you might have a pension for me, can we chat about this? Could they, sort of increase the sensitivity of it so that they return more or less partial matches according to, sort of the resource that they've got?
Yeah, so the legislation leaves it as the discretion of the trustees and managers to set the matching policy. And this is because schemes are different in terms of the quality of their data, for example. They might be able to rely on an element more than another. And so it's appropriate that that's the case. But I think you've hit on something, is this matching policy can evolve. You can change it. You should have a matching policy which says, this is what we use to be like, yes, this is a match made, and this is what we use for possible match. And obviously you don't want to have something like, if the surname matches and nothing else, I'll return a possible match. That would be kind of over the top because Richard would get every single James out there. So you need to look at your data and understand your data. And that's something I want to say is, if you're worried about the extent of it, I think the first step is to look at your data and try and get your data as good as possible, because that will reduce the number of these instances where you're not too sure. The other thing is, if you're worried about volumes, again, something Richard and his team will be looking at is how much they use in practice and what the user experience is. And we may find that they don't appear as much as people were worried about. We don't know that yet. There is already some guidance put out by PASA on what matching, what a match made could look like, what could be used for that. They'll also be looking at partial matching. So there'll be a little bit of guidance available from industry on that as well. But in answer to your question, suppressing partial matches, I think, is not the right way to think about it, because as I've explained, it's actually a really powerful tool to avoid you having one of either extreme of the breaches, either releasing data when you shouldn't, or not finding someone when you should. Both of those are clear breaches. So possible matches are something very useful.
I weigh in as well with a sort of supplementary
please do.
view on that, because I think, I absolutely agree with everything Lucy has said there. I think, seeing partial matches as one of the tools in your armory to help clear up your data is actually a really powerful way of looking at this, because we know that schemes are often spending a lot of money on trying to clear up some of that data and trace people who they haven't necessarily been able to find for a little while. Partial matches can help to crystallize some of that and give a new tool in the armory that didn't exist before. I would also just encourage schemes to be looking at the people you're working with and partnering with. So in many cases, particularly for those smaller schemes, I would expect that you'll probably connect to the ecosystem through an ISP rather than doing it directly. And you can be working with your software providers as well. I'm expecting industry as a whole to learn an awful lot on this matching question as we really get into this. We'll obviously be learning, we'll be looking at it closely and looking at what more we might need to do from the center to help drive the right matching outcomes. But I'm absolutely certain that across industry there's a lot of expertise that's going to build up on this. Partnering with ISPs around some of that is one of those ways that you might get access to some of that really good insights, because they will be doing this for lots and lots of different schemes, and you can probably learn a lot by doing that, and also using the guidance produced by people like PASA. It's really, really good, actually. I'd really encourage people to go and have a look at that. So, really work those relationships. Schemes will carry that ultimate responsibility for making sure the matching policy works for them in the context of their data. But there's going to be a lot of expertise springing up on this across industry to help, just say, use it.
Richard, yes, you're absolutely right that data is key, and having good data, good quality data, will certainly make your dashboards experience, much easier as a provider. And I know that pension providers have already put a lot of work into trying to improve their data. One of the things is I do have sympathy for them. A number of them have told me that where they have poor quality national insurance numbers, it's very difficult to find anywhere to go to that can improve the quality of that. You can improve names and addresses and dates of birth from all sorts of commercial places that can help you with that. But it really seems to be only government that knows, what the national insurance number is, and government don't seem to be too keen on, helping pension schemes out. And we know it's a fantastic tool for matching people on, but there are some people that they joined through their employer, and we've seen employers where they gave everybody in the scheme the same national insurance number. So we know all of those are wrong. So it is an area where I do have some sympathy with schemes. It's certainly one when I meet government people, I'm encouraging them to say, look, you've got the national insurance numbers. You need to find a way to help the pension schemes attach national insurance numbers to their records where they don't have one, or the one that they've got is one that they're not, 100% confident with.
Yeah, I mean, there is no checking service. Government, is not going to make one available. But you've touched on it. This information primarily comes from employers in the first place, and the employers need it for all sorts of other reasons. So there are things we can do to improve schemes working with employers and try and get it as up to date as possible. Obviously, that's once someone's had left, that's very difficult to resolve, and we do have sympathy for that. But that's why the matching policy is down to trustee discretion, because actually you may not be able to improve your national insurance numbers, and again, you can use your partial match.
Yeah, lovely. That's very helpful. Let's move it on and look at something quite different, which is individual personal pensions. We've got a question that's come in from Tim Shepherd. Thanks, Tim. Which is asking us, how will individual personal pensions be handled under the scheme registration process? Richard, that sounds a sort of processy one. Can I direct that one to you first?
I am assuming you mean literally an individual personal pension, and my understanding, but Richard, I'm saying is the way the registration duty applies is at the provider level.
Yes.
So if you are a regulated FCA provider, you register that FCA regulated provider, and you then provide all the personal pensions it oversees, including to individual personal pensions. We're not expecting an insurer to register every single personal pension. That doesn't work that way. So it's
absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on, Lucy. Yes.
Brilliant. Great. Thank you for clarifying that one. Now we have a sort of government timetable-y question, which is that obviously we've got all the primary legislation, but we do still, like other, need some bits of secondary legislation. They've got to go through Parliament, and of course we also need both FCA and TPR to publish their final regulatory rules. Are we confident this is all going to be in place by the end of the year?
Yes, as confident as we can be. So that secondary legislation is now in Parliament, which is a huge step forward. We're also working very, very closely with FCA on the regulatory material that they will be producing, and that is on track to be published and consulted on this year as well. So, it's government, right? So I'm always going to caveat this to a degree, which is that the parliamentary process is what the parliamentary process is, and we all know the political landscape can change at pace sometimes, and that can disrupt the best laid of plans. But there is a good degree of contingency in the timeline that we are following around the parliamentary process. We are exactly where we expect and need to be at this point in proceedings. So we are as confident as we can ever be with these things that we will complete that transit through Parliament in good time to support the staging timelines that have been set out.
Oh, that's really encouraging. Thanks, Richard. I know that's been, sort of worrying some people that they can see this track and they, some bits that are important aren't yet in place. So it's really great that you're at least confident that we have a timetable to get them in place when we want to get them in place. If I move on to another question, which has been attracting lots of votes, given the high hopes for dashboards in the first iteration, what can we look forward to in the future in terms of will we see planning tools, shortfall calculators, pensions aggregators, and indeed, perhaps should people be starting to think about and work about some of these tools yet, or is it just too early for that? Richard, I kind of feel that might be sort of a future gazing one for you, if that's all right.
Yeah, very happy to pick that up, and I'm sure Lucy will add to it as we go. But look, this is one of the most exciting things about dashboards for me, because we don't know all of the answers to those questions yet. The way I see dashboards is as a foundational step. They're an absolutely critical first step in joining this industry up and giving people that snapshot of what their current provision looks like. Now, we know that will then drive as many questions as answers for people, because as soon as you understand that, it's then about what are you going to do with that understanding. And that's a different answer for different people depending on their circumstances. For some, that might mean they start looking at consolidation. For others, it might mean thinking about the level of contribution that they are making. For others, yet it might be going, oh goodness me, I've only got a state pension, I really ought to do something else. So one of the things that I think we will see happen over time is that I fully expect those dashboard providers to start innovating on the back of the dashboards that they are building. We obviously have a huge job right now to land that foundational step, and let's not underestimate the amount of work that's still needed to do that. And we've got a good couple of years, as you saw from those timelines earlier, of getting industry connected up to this thing and getting those foundations in place before we can really open this up more broadly. But part of the rationale, the policy intent behind stimulating a market in dashboard providers is then to see where that goes. Now, it's really, really important that as the rest of those services and ideas start to develop, we do that in a way that is safe for citizens. I think we are all very conscious of the risks that go alongside something like this. And if we were to get 5-10 years down the line and this becomes the next mis-selling scandal, then I think we would all be deeply unhappy with that outcome. So this is where some of the consultation that the FCA are going to do later this year is so important to establish some of the regulatory framework that will underpin dashboards provision as a regulated activity, because that's going to start considering some of the questions like, what else can you do on the back of a dashboard? So what do those onward journeys look like? What do those value adding services that might spring up over time look like? Because we've got to make sure that's done in a safe way for consumers. But the potential that these dashboards generate is enormous and really, really exciting. And I talk to people regularly about where this might go, and the potential to line up some of that, the pensions visibility alongside some of your everyday spending and your current banking activities and your sort of open banking type initiatives. You get some really exciting ideas start coming out in that arena that can really equip people to transform the entirety of their financial life, not just that retirement provision. It's going to take some time for that to develop, and I suspect that what we will see is an evolving landscape on that, over quite an extended period. So it's a fairly non-specific answer from me. That is, I absolutely see potential for lots of those things that are being listed there, and many, many others besides. But we are going to have to go through that in a careful and a safe fashion, putting the interests of the consumer absolutely at the heart of that, and ensuring that as that market evolves and develops, and that innovation that we actively want to see develops, it's done safely.
Richard, I think we can certainly hear some of the enthusiasm for the future that's in your voice there. Lucy, anything in particular you'd care to add about the future question? Oh, Lucy, you're on mute.
There always has to be one. It was me this time. I just to add to that, you know, it may feel like this initial this initial offering is not maybe as whizzy as people might have hoped, but it is incredibly complicated, and even getting us there is going to be huge. And it also builds on international experience. Everyone, you know, we've spoken to the international experience. DWP did, PDP has. You know, we know that the best thing you could do is start small and build up. So that's just a general reflection. And the other thing is, with my nerdy economist hat on, is you can't predict innovation. We don't know what's going to happen. You know, there might be a completely different way of looking at this in 10 years' time that we can't possibly have thought about. So hopefully there'll be some exciting innovations coming out there that we can't think about yet. But as Richard said, the focus is to make sure that these innovations are safe for consumers and savers.
Brilliant, lovely. Okay, I'm going back to our list of questions. I can see a great one that's come in. Another super one from Tim Shepherd. Thank you, Tim. It's you know, my understanding, I think your understanding too, that you know, government has sort of drawn a line in the sand on dashboards and said dashboards are really for people that are still saving up in a pension, and they're not really for people that have already retired. They got their pension coming in by now, hopefully, so don't need a dashboard. But specifically, that's great in that once upon a time it used to be a clear-cut line, you know, sort of people worked and saved up to their 60th or 65th birthday, and then they were given the carriage clock and the state pension booklet, and off they went into retirement. Today, with pension freedoms, with the right to continue to work, with much greater flexibilities in the workflows and in the pension schemes, we see all sorts of strange moves who are people who are sort of, you know, partially crystallized and partly retired and the rest of it. So what do we know around the rules for you know, crystallization, and in particular partial crystallization?
Oh, I love a lovely techie question. Thanks, Tim. You've been you're looking at the hot topics. So the policy intent is that if someone is receiving their pension benefits, that is not shown. So that means, obviously, so if you're getting your cash on a monthly basis, it's not shown. Where some elements don't count as a crystallization event, if you see, really, you can take a lump sum without being in that category of I'm receiving the benefit. Those should be shown on dashboards. So effectively, you're right, it's the crystallization point. If you switch into being someone who receives a benefit from a pension scheme, then it doesn't show. But it's designed so those kind of cases where you've taken, it's the God, I can't even remember the acronym today, but the uncrystallized lump sum payments should be showing. The rest of your benefits should still be showing. So hopefully that answers that. But you're getting into the real techie level.
Yeah, I think there was an important point in there as well, Lucy, which is that even though you may have crystallized one or more of your pensions, if you have others that are uncrystallized, the dashboard is still for you, because those will still be on there.
Yep.
That's great. That's very helpful. Now, our next question, which is another super one from Tim. Thank you. And it's what we're quite interested in, and it's around the issues of what reliance can we put on the information which is coming to us as a provider from the individual. So they've been through the you know, sort of verification of identity. So we can take it for granted that they are the person that they say they are. But to what extent can we rely on the information that they are sending, and which bits of information will have been sort of verified by their verification services? Because on some of those, you know, we might then be able to use that to update our own data. and that if they're sending us, this is their latest mobile phone number and stuff, then that's probably an update on what we've got. And similarly, we've got lots of people where we've lost their email address, or we've lost their postal address because they moved and forgot to tell us and stuff. And particular, Tim's asking about well, the national insurance number. If they tell us what their national insurance number is, what level of credibility can we add to that? So the question, which is specifically around Nines, but I think it's more general than that, it's about to what extent can we use the data that somebody sends us in a pension find request to update and improve our own database?
Brilliant question, thank you. And this is the part where we get into GDPR stuff. So let's confirm what will be asserted in the first instance. So whenever you get a find request from a user of a dashboard, they will have been through our identity verification partner. And as you say there, Adrian, you can therefore take it as an article of faith that Richard James is indeed Richard James. And the data that you will get that will have been verified by that party is the name, current address, and date of birth. So you can take that as an article of faith that is correct, that's been verified. And the identity partner may have seen various things that has helped them to do that. They might have looked at a passport, a driving license, various other bits of data. But you can be confident that that is correct. That can then be used to do your searching and your matching. And this is really important. What you'll get alongside that is then a series of unverified data items as well that the individual may well have asserted themselves. And that would include things like previous names, a national insurance number, previous addresses. Those items will not have been verified, but will have been self-asserted by the party, and those can also be taken into account in your matching. But of course, what you're doing there is differentiating between I'm confident that Richard James is indeed Richard James versus I'm confident that this is the Richard James that I have in my records, and that's about that matching piece that we talked about earlier. What we're not gathering consent for when we collect that data from the user is for records at the pension provider to be updated around that information. And that's really, really important because, of course, with GDPR considerations, the user has to be clear on why they are providing that data and what it will be used for. And they are giving consent for that data to be used to carry out the search and the match and to return details of the pension that is known to them. And so I think that the route for updating information held at the pension scheme level is probably connected to the partial match piece, which is that if you're spotting divergences between the data that you are getting from the find request and the data that you hold, that may prompt you down the partial match route, and then you're likely to have some interaction directly with that consumer in which you can just check the correct data and update it. But what we're not looking to have is the data that's coming through from the find service then used to overwrite what is held by the pension scheme, because the user won't have given consent for that to happen. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think it does. And it's suggesting to me that the providers might want to add another sort of loop into their processes. So, if a provider's got a customer where they've got a postal address and that's matching nicely, but the email address they've got is different from the one that the individual is now asserting, and perhaps it's an email address where they've already flagged as an out of date, it just gets a bounce back. So from a GDPR perspective, I think what you're telling me is that the provider shouldn't automatically update their system with the email address the individual sent, but maybe they ought to be writing to the individual that known postal address to say, do we have your latest email address? The one that you gave us before is this, but we kind of think that's not up to date anymore. Would you like to tell us of the new one?
Yeah. Lucy, did you want to add anything from the regulator perspective? But that all works for me from a delivery perspective.
Oh, you are mute again, Lucy. We can't hear you. It's... No, it's muted you again. It did unmute and then remuted you, I'm afraid.
Apparently my mic does not want me to answer that, so let's just move on.
Okay. Lovely. Right. Our next question, which is popular, takes us on to the issue of pensions engagement. And the question is, do we think that PDP is finally going to move the needle on pensions engagement? Many people have called for greater, pensions engagement in the past, sort of government ministers amongst them. Do we think that PDP is the thing which is really going to move the needle? And Lucy, I wonder whether I could come to you on that one.
So I have to say, I have heard pensions dashboard hailed as the solution to every single ill in pensions world over time. People thought it would sort out the issue of small pots and consolidation and everything. It is not a silver bullet. It is a very important tool in an arsenal of tools that are being designed to drive engagement. But it is a tool. It will enable people to have information. Based on that information, they can go and get advice, they can go and get guidance, they can go and talk to Money Helper, who will be putting their dashboard within a pensions hub, and have the conversations that enable them to make the informed decisions. Hopefully it will drive engagement, but there are other pieces to the puzzle we need to think about. So how can we simplify how we communicate with our savers? Obviously in dashboards, there's a lot of user testing about making sure language is included, but in other engagement, in the documents that are sent out, there's a lot of work out there in industry to make things simpler, to learn from other industries about how you can communicate in plain English, to be honest. There's also the issue of financial education, making sure that people understand these things, and there's a much wider strategy on financial lives, which is led by MAPS. So I would say I very much hope it will move the needle. It will be a powerful tool, but we have to think about it holistically, and we have to think of all the other things that that we can do to really drive engagement in pensions.
Yeah, Lucy, I think I thoroughly, agree with you on that one. I remember a pensions minister who once had a dream that people would turn up in the pub and say to their mates, "I had my pensions annual benefit statement today. Have you had yours yet? I'm really excited by mine." It didn't quite happen. But I do kind of think that if we can give them a really, really good online experience, then we will find people sharing that and saying, "I've been on pensions dashboards, and they're really, really good, and it's amazing the information it told me and the rest of it." So I do hope that we can, as you say, just shift the needle a little bit. You've got to do it a bit at a time, but shift the needle a little bit. I'm going back to my list of popular questions again, and there's a great one coming here. Looks like it's very much for you, Richard. It's about the issues that MAPS uncovered. You said you've been through a lot of thorough, testing, and as a result of that, you're now quite confident that it's doing what you're doing. But can you share with us, some of those issues that MAPS uncovered during those initial test phases? Were there surprises in there? How did you go about resolving them? What have you learned from this process you can share with us?
Yeah, really happy to. So it's probably worth setting out several different types of testing that we've done. So we've learned an awful lot from our user research as we've been working up dashboard standards and working out how to design these things. So we've had big bits of research looking at things like the benefits of a partial dashboard as we go through the period of launch versus a full dashboard, where we have learned that actually if there's only a partial set of entitlements in there, it's a really dangerous place to be, both in terms of engagement and poor decision making. And that's informed our approach to things like timing of the dashboard's available point, because we don't want to be pushing people into a service that doesn't yet have coverage across the industry. We've looked at things like how do people engage with estimated retirement income? What are the key bits of data that they want to see on that? And we've tried different presentations of that and different levels of completeness of that data as well. And so our design standards there have been driven around the learning that actually people on DC pots, for example, really benefit from seeing not just the value of that pension pot today, but also that converted into estimated retirement income, at the point they get there. So those sorts of learnings from our user research have absolutely driven into the way we are working up the design standards around all of this and presenting information on dashboards. So that's one type of testing and some of the learning that we got out of it. Some of the testing that we've been doing with our early participants has then been flushing out some of the practicalities about the process of connection and how the technology works. And of course, the big intent of a lot of the testing that we've done before has been to flush out bugs and defects. You would always expect to see that sort of thing in a build on this scale. We did, and we've got, we fixed a lot of those, and we've got a big list of things that we're still working through fixing as well as we go through the early stages of this deployment now. Minor things, but things that all need fixing over time. So we've got a big forward work plan of how we go on enhancing this technology platform. So that's been really, really helpful. But one of probably the biggest things that's come out for me from our work with those early participants has been the level of support that people need in interpreting some of the technical guidance, interpreting the results of their test activity when they are in our test environment, to understand what's actually happening in the interactions between their build as a third party and the core central technical architecture itself. And actually there's been quite a need for that support. And so that has influenced the design of our onboarding processes, which is, making sure we get people through that connection process in the smoothest way possible, but also the nature and type and level of support that we're going to need to provide to data providers as they connect and carry out that testing. And that has influenced our timelines, actually, because we are now looking to move into fully supported onboarding from around January or so. And that is partly to give us a chance to get in a really, really robust and effective support model for those data providers, because one of the things we've learned is that we expect to see a lot of questions coming out of this, and we need to be able to turn those questions around quickly. So there's lots and lots of different types of learning that we've taken right the way through this process, some of which is about how we make these things work for the user, and some of which is about how we make them work for industry as you comply with your obligations as well. And we're trying to build that into the whole way we deliver from this point.
Oh, that's really, really interesting. No, thanks a lot, Richard. Lucy, is there anything you'd like to add in terms of sort of the lessons learnt so far?
So I think, as I touched upon in my introductory remarks, I mean, one of the things I found is that every time you look underneath a different dashboard rock, you uncover different issues that we didn't know about, and there's been some great creativity for solving them, and I expect we'll find more. We'll find more issues, and that's why it's so important to have these really open conversations with PDP and with the regulator about what issues are arising, and that we solve problems collaboratively. I think the work done by organisations such as PASA on trying to put some standardisation out there is really valuable, and this will only work if we just keep talking. As I said, I think we're at the beginning of our discovery journey, and we'll learn a lot more through industry experience and user testing.
That's brilliant. Lovely. Thank you. We have, well, I hope we've got a quick question that's from, Richard Parkin. Thank you, Richard, for clarifying the earlier comment. And it's about saying, when we look not at the big workplace schemes, your big master trusts and GPPs and stuff, when we look right at the other end of the industry, those sort of individual SIPs that, a few very wealthy people, have when they've probably stuffed all sorts of esoteric stuff into them, like properties and zoos and all sorts of wonderful things you can put in a SIP. Where are these covered? Are these covered as the any remaining money purchase schemes? Are we sure where their staging date is?
Yes, so to confirm on that, the slide I flashed up earlier, it references occupational pension scheme only, and we should make that clear in future, so I'll take that back to the team. SIPs are covered by personal pension scheme providers, and their staging deadline will be set by FCA rules. So FCA rules were consulted on, and they are currently reviewing the consultation responses and will be updating them. We expect them to align, because the DWP's consultation sort of shifted the very early start by a bit, and hopefully that will also align. But that's when we'll know more. So it should the personal pension schemes, we think, will align with those earliest master trusts. But the detail of that and any caveats and what happens for the smaller ones, that's all in the FCA rules, and I can't comment on them, not only because it's not my area of expertise, but also because they've just been consulted on. So the answer isn't final yet. Well,
lovely. We're coming up on time quite quickly now, so I'm going to just close off on one final question. Obviously, when we create anything big and fantastic, we're all enthusiastic about it ourselves. It attracts the less savoury parts of the population, and we may find scammers attempting to find their way in. Lucy is addressed particularly to TPR. What are TPR doing about dashboards and scammers, and what can you do to try and protect people on it?
Yeah, so very quickly, one thing is that obviously the system is designed to try and maximize security. So this ID verification service, to make sure that not anyone can kind of be confident the person is who they say they are. It's parties that are registered with TPI and FCA, the schemes that can connect. It's just not anyone who can rock up to Richard's door and connect. And there's also the wider consumer protection framework that already exists around scams. So scam smarts materials, FCA rules on promotions, requirements to get advice, rules around transfers, all those continue to apply. But again, the FCA is going to be consulting shortly on rules around dashboard providers and what they will be able to display and the warnings, etc. And that will be a very important part of that, that toolkit. So I'd encourage you to look at that when it's published.
Brilliant, lovely. Right, now we're at 1 o'clock, folks, so it is time for me to draw proceedings to a close. I need to, thank our two most capable presenters today, Lucy Stone and Richard James. Thank you very much. You've made my job enormously easy. You've answered these questions, whether they were general or technical, with aplomb. And I think you've conveyed some of the enormous enthusiasm that you have for this project, and that's really, really great. And I'm sure that will enthuse the audience, many of whom, of course, have got an awful lot of work to do, between now and when we all get connected up and when dashboards become available. So Lucy and Richard, thank you very much for coming. For all of us, we will be continuing our series of Dunstan Thomas ad hoc webinars on topical subjects. We'll be emailing today's attendees with details as and when they come around. My colleague Alex has managed all the tech behind the scenes. You haven't seen him, but he's been there beavering away, keeping us on the straight and narrow. He's also just posted at the bottom of the screen the link to our back catalogue of previous webinars. So do feel free to browse through those, and you can replay any of the previous ones that you wish. And my final duty for this afternoon is to thank you, the audience, for giving up your lunch hour and coming out to be with us. There's a great many of you out there in the audience, and we are absolutely delighted you came. And thank you very much for putting your questions up. I'm sorry we didn't quite get through all of them. But you never know, there'll be plenty of other dashboard events elsewhere. A little bird whispered in my ear that Lucy's appearing next week at Pensions Playpen. So you'll have other opportunities, I'm sure, to sort of put up those questions and get them answered, because I know that the whole team are very, very keen that those of us that have work to do to make dashboards happen actually can understand what it is we've got to do and make them happen and deliver that great customer experience that we're all hoping for. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.